morning. It's Friday, Freedom Friday, and we are on chapter 7. We're talking about Mary and Martha. And what I wanted to talk to you about today was when we feel disappointed in the Lord and very hurt sometimes because when we call out to Him, He doesn't show up. And can you just imagine, now that you've been through the chapter, how Mary and Martha felt when someone they loved was about to die, and actually did. And they called one of their dearest friends who they knew could heal him. But I'm not sure they knew that God could raise someone, or Jesus could raise someone from the dead yet. I'm not sure they knew that. But they knew Him as the healer, so they knew He could heal. And they call out for Him. They send word, and there's urgency, and He doesn't come. He doesn't come. And I just I just can feel their pain and their suffering and their disappointment when that happens. So where did this freedom come from? How did they find freedom? So here we are. Imagine this crowd around, and Lazarus is being raised from the dead, and he's free. And there's probably just jumping up and down and chaos and joy. And Jesus, I imagine Him just slowly slipping away, just letting them have their moment, and slowly Him just sort of slipping out of the picture. And so when do they have a moment to really work through their wounding? When does Mary and Martha have a moment to do that? Did they? I guess is the question. And so the Bible doesn't talk about that, but the next time we see them gathering, and I don't know how far of time, the distance in time it was from when Lazarus was raised from the dead to when Mary and Martha prepares this dinner in honor of Jesus. And I can just imagine that it was for what they did, what He did for Lazarus. And so then they gather at Martha's house one more time. And there they are, and they're reclining at the table. And having 8 brothers, I understand how it feels. And and that feeling of just the guys leaning back and just enjoying one another in fellowship at the table, around the table. And so Martha is doing what she does best, this gift of hospitality, and she is really working hard to prepare this wonderful, beautiful meal. But then where is Mary? Somewhere in all of this, Mary, she becomes convicted. And I think that just being in the presence of Jesus, just being in His presence, when He walked into the house and He sat at the table, and just being in that presence, sometimes we get convicted of things in our life. And it was a conviction from Mary. And so at some point she jumped up from what she was doing, and she ran and got her most prized possession, the most expensive thing that she had, the most valuable thing that she had, in her perfume. And so she poured it on Jesus' feet. And when I've heard this story and the story of Lazarus, I've never connected the two together. It's always been the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead, and it's always been Mary pouring the perfume on Jesus' feet. But I've never connected them together. I never thought there might be some kind of connection between the two until you read that whole full chapters, and see the whole scene of what was unfolding and what took place. And it just made sense to me that this might be a part of what was happening to how she was feeling so disappointed in Jesus at the time. And so she pours out her perfume. And let's suppose that it wasn't just a moment of worship where we always hear about this, but it was so much more than just worship. Let's suppose that this pouring out was Mary's way of finding freedom. It was Mary's way of pouring out her disappointment. It was Mary's way of pouring out her emotion. It was Mary's way of feeling, I'm sorry, just all of that emotion, laying it at the feet and pouring it upon Jesus and His feet and saying, I do believe, I do love you, I do care. and I'm sorry, and I'm sorry. Wow. Oh, must have been some kind of moment. So how do we find this freedom? And for Mary, it was coming into the presence of the Lord. It was coming in, just being in that presence with Jesus. It's finding a time and a place where we can go and be alone with the Lord. And we can be vulnerable and opening up our hearts and our hurts and our wounds and pouring that at the feet of Jesus. It's easy to build a wall when we've been hurt and stay there, really stay behind the wall. But we want to be like Mary. And we want to be vulnerable enough. We want the Holy Spirit to convict us of whatever it is that we're feeling. And we want to race to the feet of Jesus. We want to grab hold of those things that are important to us and how we feel and that we matter. And we want to pour it out at the feet of Jesus. And that's when we find freedom. So let me encourage you to go find that quiet place, to write down everything on a sheet of paper or go through it in your heart and your mind, everything that you're disappointed about, that you're struggling with, that you've been hurt about, related to the Lord, and things that you thought He should have done and He didn't. And would you be willing to take those things in your quiet time and in this quiet, peaceful place? Would you be willing to release those, to pour those out to the Lord, and be vulnerable enough to allow whatever emotion is there to come forward? And when you do, I promise you're going to have a relief and there's going to be freedom. You don't have to hold on to these things. And Jesus doesn't want us to. God doesn't want us to hold on to those. He wants to take whatever you have and lay it at, He wants you to lay it at His feet. And so let me encourage you to do that over this weekend, during this time of this Bible study. And let's become a Mary. Let's become a Mary. Thanks for joining us, and Dina and I were praying for you, and you can do it. I know you can. So give it a try. Let us know how you're doing in this study and what's been going on in your life. And we thank you for those who have reached out to us, and thank you for that. All right, we'll talk soon.